A lonely woman hears an extra set of footsteps and discovers a shadow that is not her own. Follow Noah's terrifying descent as mirrors lie, walls breathe, and the house remembers every hidden fear. Will she escape the darkness or welcome it home? Hit subscribe and ring the bell so you never miss another chilling story. Like the video if the whispering walls unsettled you, and share it with fellow horror lovers. The hallway was quiet, too quiet. Nora Jennings stood still in the middle of her living room, one hand clutching the edge of the worn blanket draped over her shoulders, the other hanging limply by her side. The air felt unusually dense, as if something invisible pressed in from the walls. From outside, the wind rasped softly against the window panes, a dry, papery sound that reminded her of old hands brushing against curtains. She listened, and there it was again. Step, step. But she wasn't moving. Her feet remained flat against the cold hardwood floor. Her slippers hadn't budged. Her breath caught in her throat. She tilted her head slightly, ears straining. The sound had come from behind her, soft but distinct, the subtle pressure of weight shifting on floorboards. Just 2 steps. Nora spun around. The room was empty. The corner lamp buzzed faintly with low voltage. The beige armchair, the tiny bookshelf, the photos on the wall. Everything was just as it should be, except for the growing silence. She tried to laugh, but it came out thin and brittle. "You're tired, that's all," she whispered to herself, her voice barely audible over the humming refrigerator in the next room. It had been 3 months, a small rental tucked away near the edge of Maple Hollow, quiet, modest, and, importantly, isolated, just how she liked it. After her divorce, Nora had craved distance from everything and everyone. Solitude had become her safety net. But tonight, solitude felt like a trap. She padded slowly into the hallway, brushing her fingers against the wall. She passed the closed door to the guest room, then the bathroom. All dark, all quiet. She stopped at the end of the hallway and turned. No shadows moved behind her, no sound. Still, she couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. That was the first night she heard the extra. It wouldn't be the last. The following morning was uneventful. Nora made her tea, fed her elderly cat Miso, and opened the windows to let the breeze in. Birds chirped distantly, and the scent of pine drifted through the mesh screen. She almost forgot about the sound. Almost. Until she walked past the hallway mirror. Something made her pause. She stepped back, looked into the glass. Her reflection blinked back at her, blanket still draped over her shoulders. But for a fraction of a second, just a flicker, she could have sworn the shadow next to hers shifted, slightly out of sync. She squinted, moved left, then right. A shadow followed, perfectly aligned. Maybe she imagined it. Maybe not. She turned away, but the unease nestled at the base of her spine like a cold breath. That night, the footsteps came again. This time, not just once. Nora was brushing her teeth when she heard them in the hallway behind her. Step, step, pause, step. She stared at her reflection in the bathroom mirror. toothbrush frozen in her mouth. Her eyes moved down, trailing her own shape. Her shadow was there. But it was thinner than usual, elongated. It didn't match her movements. She turned sharply, foam still on her lips. Empty hallway. No one there. She backed into the bathroom and closed the door, locking it. Her heart was pounding hard enough to make her chest ache. Slowly, she pressed her ear against the door. Silence. Then, a whisper. It wasn't a word. Not quite. More like breath, trying to be something. The sound scraped lightly against her ear, as if it came from the other side of the door, waiting for her to open it. She slept on the couch that night, lights on. On the third night, she set her phone to record. She placed it on the hallway table, camera facing the living room, and hit record before retreating to her bedroom. The door stayed ajar, just in case. Her dreams were restless, murky shapes moving behind a veil. When she awoke, the sky was beginning to pale. She grabbed the phone with trembling hands. Video length, 6 hours and 22 minutes. She scrubbed through the footage quickly, watching the empty living room remain unchanged, until the timestamp hit 3:12 a.m. There, a flicker of movement, fast, almost imperceptible. The shadow near the lamp grew longer, darker, but the light hadn't changed. It simply stretched, as if something invisible had passed between the light and the wall. Nora paused the video, zoomed in. Her hands began to shake. There were 2 shadows now. One, her size, and a second, smaller, narrower, but with the same outline, following behind her figure, mimicking her shape. Except she hadn't been in the frame. She had been in her bedroom the whole time. By the end of the week, Nora had stopped turning the lights off. The ceiling lights in the kitchen stayed on day and night. She left the hallway lamp glowing and bought 3 battery-operated lanterns just in case of a blackout. She began to talk to herself more, just to fill the silence. And every night, the footsteps grew bolder. They no longer waited for her to pause. They echoed, soft and wet, along the wood floor, even when she was sitting still. Step, step, shuffle. Sometimes they circled her. Sometimes they stopped right behind her chair. She never turned around. She didn't want to see if there was a figure standing where there should have been nothing. One evening, she watched the living room window as the sun went down. The golden light painted long shadows across the floor. Her own stretched forward, and then, behind her, a second one appeared. It did not originate from her body. It emerged from beside her, slowly forming, head, shoulders, arms, rising. Nora didn't move. The shadow shifted. It leaned toward her shadow's ear. And in the silence of the house, she heard the smallest, coldest whisper. "I know where you hide." She gasped and turned, but there was no one there. Just the dying light and a shadow that no longer vanished. The bulb above her flickered again. Nora stood in the center of her kitchen, holding a steaming mug of chamomile tea, though the warmth did little to stop her fingers from trembling. The overhead light blinked twice, a sharp tick-tick sound accompanying each flutter, like fingernails tapping glass. She tilted her head back to stare at it. It had been new. She replaced it just 2 days ago. She hadn't touched the switch. She hadn't touched anything. Behind her, the refrigerator hummed low and steady. Outside, the wind had picked up, dragging leaves along the porch in a scraping rhythm that echoed faintly through the cracks in the window frame. Then she heard it again. Step, drag, step. It wasn't Miso. The cat hadn't moved from the couch all evening, curled into a silent loaf with her eyes half closed, but watching everything. She hadn't meowed in days. Nora turned slowly, mug still in hand, gaze sweeping across the open kitchen and into the living room. Shadows lay thick along the corners, the kind of shadows that didn't belong to any light. She had every lamp on, every switch up, but still, those corners remained stubbornly dark, too dark for a place so lit. She stepped back and bumped against the counter. Her fingers tightened on the mug, the ceramic burning her palm. She placed it down gently and reached for her phone. It wasn't on the counter. She always left it there. Always. Her breath caught. Her eyes scanned the room quickly, then dropped to the floor. The phone was there, several feet away, face up. The screen lit, recording. Nora froze. She hadn't touched it. She stepped forward, heart hammering hard enough she could feel it in her throat. She picked up the phone with unsteady hands, thumb hesitating above the screen before pressing stop. The video had been recording for exactly 8 minutes and 33 seconds. The last time she'd checked the phone was when she came back from the store, hours ago. She hadn't even unlocked it since. With the volume low, she played the video. For the first few minutes, it was just her standing at the stove, boiling water. She watched herself on screen, expression tired, back slightly hunched. Then, near the 5-minute mark, movement. Behind her back. A shadow shifted along the cabinets. Not hers. It didn't mimic her motions. It paused when she moved. It stepped forward when she turned away. It lingered, just beyond her sight. She scrubbed forward and stalked abruptly. There it was, a silhouette. No eyes, no mouth, but unmistakably shaped like a human figure, slightly hunched, with arms too long for its body, standing directly behind her. And then, on screen, her own shadows split in two. Not just another cast of light from a second source. It separated, moved independently. For a few seconds, there were two Noras standing in the room, one real, one not. Then the screen fuzzed with static and cut to black. Her hand went numb, and the phone slipped from her fingers, hitting the tile floor with a dull crack. Silence. Then came the buzzing, not from the phone, from the lights, all of them. Buzzing low, like a swarm of insects hidden just behind the walls. The sound grew louder, deeper, until it was a droning hum that pressed into her ears. Then every light in the house blinked out. Darkness. The sudden shift made her knees buckle slightly. She reached for the counter, gripping its edge, breathing sharp and shallow. And then, a voice. It was not loud. It was not angry. It was close, right behind her ear. You don't need the light. Nora screamed and spun. Arm raised to strike, but there was nothing. No shape, no breath, no warmth of another body. Just the pitch-black silence and the smell of birth. Damp soil. Like something had just been dug up. She fumbled through a drawer, found one of the battery lanterns, and turned it on. The cold LED glow illuminated the space around her in harsh blue-white, sharp and clinical. Nothing moved, but the shadows no longer obeyed. They hung differently now, like they were watching her. The next morning, she didn't leave the house. She sat at the kitchen table for hours, watching the light through the window shift slowly across the wall, studying her own shadow. It remained still, but she didn't trust it, not anymore. At noon, she called the landlord. "Mr. Redley, have there ever been issues with the power in this house?" "Power?" His voice crackled slightly over the poor signal. "No, can't say there have. Wiring's been updated. New panel just last year." "What about—" She hesitated. "Has anyone ever complained about seeing things here?" A pause. "You all right, Miss Jennings?" She swallowed. "Fine, just weird shadows." "Well," he chuckled, but it sounded strained. "That's old houses for you. They creak, may settle, they play tricks." Nora didn't respond. She stared at her reflection in the black screen of the microwave. Her shadow stood behind her again. Too close, too straight. She ended the call. That night, she turned off all the lights, not because she wasn't afraid, but because she wanted to see it. The house settled around her in the dark, the kind of quiet that wasn't peaceful, the kind that whispered, that watched, that waited. Nora sat in her armchair, wrapped in the blanket, lantern resting unlit beside her. Miso lay at her feet, but didn't sleep. The cat stared at the far wall, eyes unblinking. And then, movement, the hallway again. She didn't turn this time. Instead, she listened. Step, drag, step, pause, step behind her. Not on the floor, on the ceiling. The sound of bare feet against the wood, upside down. She looked up, and in the faintest outline of the moonlight bleeding in from the kitchen window, she saw it. A hand, too long, thin fingers splayed wide, gripping the ceiling. A second hand followed, and then the head, tilted, watching her upside down, eyes too black to reflect light. Her mouth opened, but no sound came. It crawled slowly along the ceiling above her, moving like a spider, joints bending the wrong way. It passed directly over her, then gone. No sound of it dropping to the floor, no creak, no whisper, just gone. Nora remained still for hours. The lantern stayed unlit. She didn't dare look behind her shadow. Not anymore. Rain tapped against the window like impatient fingers, steady, rhythmic. The sky outside had sunk into a dull gray, and the wind hissed low across the yard, weaving through the dead branches of the oak trees. Inside, Nora Jennings sat on the couch, unmoving, her legs tucked beneath her and her arms crossed tightly against her chest. The room was quiet. Too quiet. Miso hadn't left the bedroom all day. She had curled herself into a tight ball beneath the bed and refused to come out, even when Nora shook the treat jar. That was the first real sign something was wrong. The second was the chair across from her. The antique wooden chair had belonged to the previous tenant. Mr. Redley had insisted she could keep it. "It's got history," he'd said. "Real craftsmanship." Nora hadn't thought much of it. It was just a chair. old, creaky, with spindly arms and a cushion that sagged slightly in the middle. But now it was where the shadow liked to be. It never moved when she watched it directly, but it was always there, even when she didn't sit down. There was a shape in that chair. A dark dent in the cushion, a presence. When she sat, it stood. When she stood, it waited. This morning, she'd tested it. She positioned herself in front of the hallway mirror, sunlight streaming through the window behind her. Just for a moment, she held still, then shifted slightly, subtly. Her shadow followed, but the second shadow, it moved first. It rose from the chair before she did. It anticipated her. That was what truly terrified her. Not that it mimicked, but that it knew. Now, as the storm began to intensify outside, Nora stared at the chair again. It was empty, at least visibly so. But the shadows on the floor told a different story. Her own was slouched, mirroring her body. Arms drawn in, small. The second was upright, shoulders squared. Head turned slightly in her direction. Watching, she whispered to herself, "You don't belong here." The lights flickered. "Leave," she said again, voice firmer. The cushion of the chair slowly began to compress, as if someone had just sat down. And then the whisper came again, from right beside her ear. "This was mine before it was yours." She stood abruptly. The whisper evaporated, but not the cold. It clung to her, seeped into her skin like moisture into wood. She moved to the kitchen, hands shaking slightly as she reached for the kettle. The moment her back turned, she heard the soft scrape of wood against wood. The chair. Sliding forward, she whipped around. It was exactly where it had been, but the rug beneath it was bunched slightly now, curled as if the legs had dragged across it. Nora backed away. Her breath came in shallow gasps. She didn't blink, not until she heard the faint sound of a door opening. Upstairs. She hadn't opened any doors. She hadn't been upstairs. The staircase creaked, one slow, deliberate sound. She grabbed the flashlight from the kitchen drawer. She didn't trust the power anymore, didn't trust light itself. And still, she climbed the stairs. Each step groaned beneath her weight. The flashlight beam trembled with her grip. She reached the landing, paused, and turned toward the guest room. The door stood wide open. Inside, dust floated through the beam like tiny spirits. The bed was untouched, perfectly made. No footprints in the carpet. But the mirror. It was an old vanity mirror attached to a cracked wooden dresser. She had never really used it, and now, in the reflection, she saw herself, standing still. But behind her, something else. It stood taller than her, limbs stretched far too long. Its fingers brushed the ceiling. It didn't move until she blinked. Then it leaned closer. She turned quickly, heart slamming against her ribs. Nothing there, but the mirror still showed the shape. It had begun to crouch, as if preparing to step out. She grabbed the bedsheet from the mattress and flung it over the mirror. She couldn't breathe. She ran downstairs, and the chair was empty again. But her shadow remained in it. That night, she decided not to sleep. She sat with every light on, every curtain open, the flashlight and her phone both at the ready. She positioned the mirror from her bathroom directly across the room so she could keep an eye on her reflection at all times. She watched as her shadow flickered and shifted. It no longer obeyed. At 2:47 a.m., it stood up. Nora did not. She remained seated. Her reflection did not move, but the shadow, it stepped forward. And then she heard it. From every wall, from every corner, even from behind the television screen, scraping, like fingernails dragging along stone. Then a sound behind her, a soft, wet exhale. She turned her head slowly, the muscles in her neck stiff with dread. There was no one there, but on the armrest beside her, 4 indentations, as if fingers had rested there, gently, patiently. She looked back at her shadow. It had returned to its place, sitting still, but the chair itself was now facing her, turned while she wasn't looking. Her voice cracked as she whispered, "What do you want?" The shadows on the floor shuddered, pulsed like they were breathing. Then came the voice again, low, right against her skin. "You sit in my silence. Now I will speak." Nora screamed, and this time her shadow did not. It smiled. The sheet did nothing. It fluttered at night, whispering like it had a mouth. No matter how tightly Nora pinned it across the mirror upstairs, by morning it always sagged, or worse, it had slid to the floor. Twice she had found it in the hallway, folded neatly, as if something had hands, as if it had courtesy. Nora stopped sleeping. Her eyes were bruised with exhaustion, but every time she closed them, the figure from the mirror pressed against the inside of her lids. Its eyes weren't white. They were pits, deep, wide, and crawling. Not empty, but infested with something that twitched when she dared look too long. The days became slow stretches of paranoia. Light felt artificial. Time stretched thin and brittle, like wet paper drying in the wrong shape. She stopped checking the clocks. They no longer made sense anyway. The microwave blinked 3:33 for 7 hours. Her phone refused to update. Her wristwatch had cracked, its second hand jerking back and forth like it was caught. But the mirror never stopped working. It showed everything. It showed more than it should. This morning, when she passed the bathroom, the mirror called to her again. Not with sound, but with weight. Her eyes flicked to it involuntarily, and what she saw rooted her in place. She stood in the reflection, but her back was to the mirror. She reached up slowly to touch her own shoulder. In the mirror, the reflection did not move. She stared, and then it turned. Not all at once. The head rotated first, far past what a neck should allow. The body followed in slow fragments, spine first, hips cracking. The face that stared at her had her own features, but the skin was off, paler, swollen, slightly stretched at the mouth, like it had been wearing her too long and the seams had started to slip. Its lips did not move, but behind the glass, a sound bloomed. It started like a moan, then a dry crackling. Like leaves being ground to dust beneath bare feet, a whisper crawled through the static of the bathroom's silence. "Let me see through your eyes." Nora stepped back. Her heel caught the rug. She fell hard onto the tile, pain jolting up her spine. She scrambled up and yanked the medicine cabinet door open, slamming it over the glass. The whisper stopped instantly. Silence flooded back in like a tide receding too fast. She breathed, shallow and sharp, hands still trembling on the cold metal handle. Then the cabinet mirror began to fog, but not from her breath, from inside the glass. Letters formed on the surface, traced by an invisible finger. "I am looking!" Nora screamed and ran. She didn't touch the mirrors again. She covered every one she could find, even the ones she forgot she had. Pocket compacts, the back of her phone case, the small decorative oval above the bookshelf. She smashed the guest vanity with a hammer. But the pieces still reflected. And sometimes her face wasn't in them. Other times it was, but blinking when she wasn't. By nightfall, she had taped black paper over every reflective surface she could find. The refrigerator's glossy finish, the oven door, even the dark screen of the TV. And still, at midnight, the whispers returned. This time, they came from the walls. Soft, wet smacking sounds, like lips parting in a whisper too close to skin. They chanted slowly. "Show me, show me, show me." She sat in the middle of her bedroom, rocking back and forth, flashlight clutched to her chest. Miso had vanished. She had searched every room, every closet, even outside in the rain, only to find paw prints at the base of the hallway mirror, leading in, none leading back out. Nora's mind cracked in quiet pieces, not with screaming, but with silence. She made tea, poured 2 cups. She placed one on the table in front of the mirror she couldn't bear to smash. "I know you're not me," she said, voice almost calm. "I know you're inside." The reflection sat down. Her real body didn't move. It lifted the teacup. So did she. Not by choice. Her hand rose, twitching. Fingers clenched tight around the cup. Her muscles strained as if pulled by string. "I'm not letting you in," she whispered. The figure inside the mirror smiled, and the tea in her cup went cold instantly. The next morning, she made a decision. She dragged the hallway mirror into the backyard. It was heavy. The wood cracked once against the back steps. The glass didn't break. She stood above it with the hammer. Her reflection stared up. It looked tired, not angry, not monstrous, just old, hollow, skin sallow, eyes sagging with sadness. And it whispered, just loud enough for her to hear over the wind. "I was you." Nora lifted the hammer. Her arms trembled, and in the mirror, her reflection lifted its own hammer. But it wasn't holding anything. It had no weapon, and still the reflection moved in sync, except for the mouth. It mouthed one word, over and over: "Stay." Nora screamed and brought the hammer down. The glass cracked, not shattered. And then, but cracked in a perfect circle around the reflection's face. A sound like a child gasping echoed from within the crack. A breath! She stepped back, and for the first time, she saw nothing reflected. Not her, not the trees, not the sky. Just a depthless black, a portal without light. And from it came the slow sound of footsteps, not on grass, on glass, inside the mirror, coming closer. The mirror remained in the backyard, cracked, silent, cold. Rain had begun to fall, soft at first, like whispers against the grass. Now it came heavier, a constant drumming that drowned out the usual sounds of birds and rustling branches. Nora watched from the kitchen window, her breath fogging the glass as she leaned closer. No footprints. She had walked across that same patch of grass an hour ago, dragging the mirror over the wet soil. Her own steps were still there, pressed deep and muddy in the shape of her boots. But there were more now, a second trail, identical in size and pattern, except they weren't hers. They trailed back to the house, stopping right beneath the kitchen window, right where she was standing. She didn't move. Her eyes scanned the yard again. Still no one. But the back door creaked, even though the wind wasn't strong enough to move it. Nora locked it. Twice. She started marking the floor, every doorway, every hall. Chalk lines, thin white barriers that felt ridiculous even as she drew them, but they gave her something to focus on. She whispered as she worked, "Stay out, stay out, stay out," over and over like a broken record, her voice flat, dry, empty of hope. She drew a thick line at the edge of her bedroom door and stepped inside, placing the chalk at the baseboard. Miso still hadn't come back. Her food sat untouched. The bowl of water had grown still, not a single ripple. Nora left the bedroom light off. She didn't want to see the shadow again. Instead, she sat on the floor and listened to the wind, to the rain, to the house as it exhaled in quiet cracks and subtle groans. Then, step, step, scrape from the hallway. She clutched the blanket tighter around her shoulders. The sound stopped at the edge of the chalk line. The silence was heavier than footsteps. Her skin crawled. Then a soft scratch right at the doorframe, a fingernail tracing the chalk. It circled the line, slowly, repeatedly. Then a whisper, not from inside the room, but inside her head. "Your steps are not yours." She slapped her hands to her ears, rocking forward and back. "No, no, no!" But her memory betrayed her. She remembered walking to the bathroom earlier and hearing a step behind her, exactly in time with her own. She remembered bending to tie her shoe and seeing another hand reaching down in the corner of her eye. She remembered touching the doorknob and feeling fingers already there. She stood suddenly, flipped on the bedroom light. Nothing. She looked down at the chalk line, still unbroken. But on the inside of the room, there were muddy footprints, one after the other, trailing across the rug, ending just behind where she'd been sitting. She turned, slowly. Nothing there, but her shadow was gone. That night she tried to record again. She set up her phone on a tripod in the living room, facing the mirror she hadn't yet smashed. She didn't watch the screen. She couldn't. Not this time. She left it running and went upstairs, dragging the chalk with her, redrawing every barrier. Every time she finished one, a soft wind would breathe across the line, like something exhaling from the walls. At 3:15 a.m., her phone battery died. She hadn't touched it. When she reviewed the video later, only the last 10 seconds had saved. In that short clip, the screen showed the living room exactly as she left it, until the shadow walked in. It wasn't shaped like her anymore. It was taller. Its arms hung longer than they should, fingertips brushing the floor as it moved. The light from the hallway didn't touch it. It passed in front of the mirror, but the mirror reflected nothing. Just the room, just the light. No shadow. Then, ... A single footprint appeared on the couch cushion, sunken, damp, as if someone had stepped there. And then another, leading upward, up the wall, up the ceiling, and then into the corner, where the recording ended. Nora didn't sleep. She stayed up listening to the creaks above her, to the faint, wet sounds of something pacing the ceiling. Sometimes it dropped down into the hallway. She knew it was there. She could hear it breathing, low, rattling breaths, like someone inhaling through cracked glass. And always, just one step behind her. She paced her bedroom, checking the chalk. Still there, still whole, until she blinked. And her eyes caught something in the mirror across the room. Footprints, appearing one by one across the chalk line, but not walking in, walking out. From inside the line, coming toward her. She turned to run. Her foot hit something wet. She looked down. A single footprint, facing hers, fresh, still sinking, still warm. And then she saw the second shadow stretch across the floor beside her, not matching her shape, not moving with her, but leading her into the dark. Nora hadn't spoken in 3 days. Words no longer felt safe. The last time she whispered into the silence, the house whispered back, and its voice had sounded too much like hers. The whispers hadn't stopped. They had simply learned how to wait. They didn't echo anymore. They breathed. Soft exhales from air vents that hadn't worked in months. Gentle sounds from beneath the floorboards, behind light switches, inside pillowcases. Each whisper threaded itself into the stillness like mold on fabric. Quiet, spreading, inevitable. That morning, she awoke to a voice humming in the dark. Low, off-key, familiar. It was the lullaby her mother used to sing when she had night terrors as a child. But her mother was dead. Had been for 12 years. Nora opened her eyes. The ceiling above her was pitch black, though the window let in pale gray morning light. She blinked. The shape above her blinked too. A shadow hovered, clinging to the ceiling like mildew, featureless, but somehow smiling. She couldn't see its mouth, but she could feel it. Then came the whisper. We remember what you forget. She sat up too quickly. Her head throbbed. The shape receded, crawling back into the corner of the room where the ceiling met the wall and folding in on itself like smoke pressed into a jar. She couldn't remember falling asleep. She couldn't remember going to bed. She checked the floor. The chalk lines were gone. No smudges, no trails, just gone, as if the house had licked them clean. She spent the day without mirrors. Every shiny surface now sat beneath sheets, towels, cardboard taped hastily in place. Even water had become dangerous. Reflections in the sink no longer matched her face. She had seen herself crying once, even though her eyes were dry. She stopped using the bathroom light altogether. At sunset, the wind died. Completely. It was the first thing she noticed. The trees had stopped swaying. No branches scratched the windows. Not even a creak from the porch. A deep, unnatural stillness settled over the house, pressing in like static before a thunderclap. Then came the knocking. Not on the door, from inside the walls. Knock, 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 like knuckles gently rapping on drywall. It moved from the baseboard near the front door, down the hallway, behind her bedroom wall, then the ceiling directly overhead. Knock, knock, knock. Measured, deliberate, searching. Nora pressed her back into the closet, flashlight gripped tightly in her hand. She kept the beam off. Light only made the shadows stronger now. They used it, twisted it. The last time she shined a light into a dark corner, something leaned into it and smiled back. The knocking stopped. Then came the whisper, right against the inside of her ear. "Let me in, let me in, let me." She screamed and clamped her hands over her ears, rocking until the voice sank back into the stillness. Silence returned, and with it, the cold. Not wind chill, not the absence of warmth, but something deliberate, something breathing into the room. Her breath fogged. Then so did the inside of the closet door. Words appeared in the condensation, written backwards from the other side of the wood. "You are not where you think you are." Nora backed against the coats behind her. One sleeve reached across her shoulder. She hadn't hung anything that long in years. She ran, out the room, down the stairs, into the kitchen. Everything was exactly where it had been. The kettle, the half-empty teacup. The chair pulled out from the table just a little too far. But something was missing. The sounds. No fridge hum. No old pipes ticking. Not even her own footsteps. She turned. ... Her reflection stared at her through the oven glass, not mirroring her, just watching. Its mouth moved, whispering. But Nora couldn't hear it, so it began writing. The condensation on the oven built slowly as the air around her chilled. She watched, heart pounding, as letters began to form again. "You left the door open," and beneath it, slowly scrawled, "I did not come alone." The whispers started multiplying after that. Not one voice, several. Some sounded like her father. Others like her childhood friend who drowned when they were 12. And one sounded like her, not from her throat, from under the floorboards. Nora covered every vent, piled furniture against the attic door, nailed shut the closet. But the voices kept threading through the air, like wet hair across her face, brushing against her skin, curling into her mouth when she tried to speak. She found herself answering them, not with words, with gestures, with glances toward corners where she felt eyes, with hands held up in surrender, with whispered apologies to nothing. On the fourth night of silence, she awoke to find her bed in the middle of the hallway. She hadn't moved it. The floor beneath it was covered in muddy footprints, but only hers, and all of them, leading backward, toward her room. As if she had walked herself into the hall in her sleep, then crawled back into the bed. Only she hadn't. She hadn't. But something else had, and it still whispered, still waited, still listened. The stillness now had teeth, and they were getting closer. It began speaking her name at 3:07 a.m. Not shouting, not whispering, just saying it. Nora, as if it had always known. She sat up in bed, heart already hammering, because she hadn't been dreaming. Not this time. She had been lying awake, eyes on the ceiling, waiting for the voice to return. Nora. It came from downstairs. She listened, too afraid to move, too afraid not to. There were no footsteps, no creaking boards, just that voice, her name. Said like a question that already knew the answer. Nora. Soft, patient, closer. She gripped the edge of the mattress, the fabric stiff beneath her fingers. The hallway light, left on for comfort, flickered once, then stayed lit. She stood. Her shadow did not follow. It remained seated on the bed, legs folded neatly beneath it, head tilted toward her like a painting come alive. Nora did not breathe. Her voice cracked, dry as paper. Get out! The shadow smiled. Then it stood, without rising. It was suddenly upright, and her breath caught in her throat, because its mouth opened too. Nora. But this time, the voice came from inside the walls. She ran to the door, slammed it shut, locked it twice, and shoved a chair beneath the knob. Her shadow remained behind the door, watching, still smiling. At dawn, she searched the house again. It was a ritual now. Walk each room, touch every window frame, count the doors. She had 22 interior doors in total. This morning, there were 23. The extra door stood at the end of the hall, past the linen closet. It hadn't been there yesterday. The wood was darker, older, splintered at the bottom, like it had been dragged here from someplace else. There was no knob, just a thin line carved into the center. And something black and sticky leaking out beneath it. She stared for a long time. Then she knocked. Not out of bravery, out of habit. The knock came back. 2 knocks. Slower, deeper. From further away than the door should allow, she stepped back. The floor creaked beneath her, once. From behind, she turned sharply. The hallway was empty. She looked back at the door. Gone. Only the wallpaper remained. But something still oozed from the seam in the wall, like tar, like blood that had forgotten how to be read. She tried leaving the house that afternoon. She grabbed her coat, her keys, her boots, and walked out the front door without looking back. The air outside was clean, cold. The trees were still. No wind. The road was empty. She took 7 steps forward. Then the sidewalk ended. Just ended. Not broken, not blocked. It simply wasn't there. Beyond it stretched the same 3 feet of concrete, repeated over and over. Every direction she turned, she saw the same stretch, same cracked line in the cement, same faded gum stain. She knelt, touched the surface. It was real, but it wasn't hers. The air thickened. The birds overhead stopped singing. And then, from behind her, "Where do you think you're going, Nora?" She turned slowly. The house was gone. Only the door remained. Standing alone in the middle of a dirt field, upright, unattached to anything. wide open, and behind it, her living room. Lamp on, chair pulled out, cup of tea on the table still steaming. She stepped back, but the shadow stepped forward. Out from the threshold, its hands first. Long, wrong. It stepped through the door and onto the dirt without making a sound, and smiled. I was born when you forgot yourself. Nora ran. The world flickered. Then the house was back. The door shut behind her with a sound like cracking bone. That night, she didn't sleep. She didn't move. She sat in the armchair with the flashlight off, staring at the window that no longer reflected light. It reflected a version of her home that was slightly wrong. The books on the shelf were all blank. The photographs had no faces, and her reflection, it was sitting in the wrong chair. She stood, so did the reflection. She raised her arm. It waved, then mouthed a word. She squinted. It said it again, mine. She stepped back. Her foot landed on something soft. She looked down. A photograph. It hadn't been there before. She picked it up. It was old, yellowed at the corners. A child stood in a field, staring at the camera. No expression, no eyes, just a dark shape where the head should be. Behind the child was her house, but it was burnt, collapsed, charred wood and cinders. In the bottom corner of the photo, written in faded ink, Nora. Home. She dropped it, and from behind her, welcome back. The house exhaled and the lights went out. The photograph hadn't vanished this time. It lay where she dropped it, beside her foot on the wooden floor, curled slightly at the edges as if trying to fold in on itself. The face of the child remained blank, head a shadow, limbs thin and stiff. Behind it, her house stood charred and collapsed. The very shape of it burned into memory. The caption still read the same. Nora, home. She bent to pick it up with trembling fingers, half expecting it to dissolve in her grasp. But the paper was solid, damp with age, warm, too warm. She flipped it over. A fingerprint had been pressed into the back, a long one, smudged, wet. Not hers. She backed away, pressing her spine against the wall, but it didn't feel like the wall anymore. It pulsed, breathing. She dropped the photo again. From the hallway, the floor creaked. A slow, deliberate step. Then another. No voice this time, just the creaking. One board at a time, advancing down the hallway toward her. She turned and fled into the study, slamming the door behind her and twisting the old brass lock. But the sound followed. It didn't knock. It didn't try to open the door. It just waited. The air inside the study was still. Too still. Dust floated motionless, as if gravity itself had hesitated. Her breath fogged in the center of the room but didn't drift. She turned. The painting above the fireplace had changed. It used to be a still life, roses in a cracked ceramic vase, forgettable, comforting. Now it was a window, her window, looking in. She stepped closer, unsure if the image was a trick of light or something worse. Her breath caught as she realized it wasn't a painting at all. It was a view. The glass was not canvas. It was glass, And on the other side, in the darkness, stood her reflection, or something that had once worn her shape. Its smile was wider than hers, its skin pulled tight like it had been stitched from memory. It didn't blink, and behind it the background shimmered and shifted. Her bedroom, her hallway, her basement stairs, all folded into one another, like the house had collapsed inward and rebuilt itself inside this window. She raised her hand. So did it. But when she lowered hers, it didn't. It kept waving. Then it pressed its palm flat against the glass. Nora stepped back. The light in the study flickered. The door creaked behind her, though she had locked it. She turned slowly. But the knob remained still. No one was there. Then came the whisper, different this time. Not from behind her, from inside the frame. "Come inside. It's safer here." Where? The voice was her own, but too calm, too smooth, like it had been practiced 100 times behind the walls. She turned back to the frame. Her reflection was gone. The window now showed the street outside, her mailbox, the broken lamppost, a figure standing at the edge of the driveway. The shape was familiar. Long coat, bent head, bare feet. She moved closer. The figure lifted its head. It was her, but older. Eyes sunken, skin torn at the corners of her mouth. A sketched line across the throat, like something had sewn it shut and then forced it open again. She whispered to the frame, "What do you want?" The answer came like wind across dry leaves. "I want to go back." The figure outside took a step forward. So did Nora. Then the glass rippled like water, and a hand came through. Long fingers, gray skin, nails like splinters. It touched her shoulder. Cold burned into her skin. She screamed and pulled back, falling hard to the floor. The hand retreated, but the print remained on her shoulder. A handprint, not human. She backed into the corner, eyes wide, pulse pounding. The frame was blank now, but not empty. It began to hum, a low vibration, deep enough to make the floor tremble. Then the wall behind it cracked, hairline splits, spreading like veins. Inside the cracks, darkness, not shadow, but the kind of black that ate light. And from within it came one soft, terrible sound, breathing, like something had just found her. She didn't sleep that night. She watched the painting, no, the window, for hours. It changed, showed memories. Her in the 3rd grade, hiding under a desk during a storm. Her mother brushing her hair. A birthday party she didn't remember. Then a hospital room, monitors, wires, a nurse whispering, a priest at the foot of a bed, her bed. The girl in the bed wasn't breathing. And Nora stumbled back, gasping. "That's not me. That's not real." The frame whispered again. "You don't know what's real." Then the door burst open behind her. Not slowly, not with wind, but violently, like something had decided she no longer had a choice. The hallway outside was pitch black, not darkness from night, but absence, a void, and at the center of it, her shadow waited, not cast by her, but standing, real, solid, grinning. It spoke again. "You're already in the frame." and the door slammed shut from the inside. The walls no longer held still. They twitched when she blinked, shivered when she breathed. The wallpaper peeled in spirals, not from age or moisture, but in patterns, spirals that turned inward, deeper, as if trying to lead her somewhere. Nora hadn't left the study in 3 days. Not after the door slammed shut. Not after the window frame swallowed her reflection and spat back a stranger. Not after the whisper told her the truth in the quietest, cruelest voice. Your shadow walks when you don't. She had tested it. She placed her flashlight on the floor and sat facing the far wall, her back straight, her breath shallow. And her shadow moved. It stood without her, crossed the room, paused at the bookshelf, tilted its head as if reading titles. It turned to look at her. No eyes, just a shape. But she felt the stare. Then it mimicked a smile and nodded. It knew she was watching. She whispered, "Why are you doing this?" No voice replied. Instead, the books began to fall, one at a time, in perfect rhythm, as if counted out by metronome. Thud, thud, thud. Each book landed open. Pages fluttered wildly, even though there was no breeze. The words had changed. Each page read the same line. You're already gone. Nora backed into the corner, her knees buckled. And the floor beneath her felt uneven now, like she was sitting on top of something buried, or something waking. At midnight, she opened the door again. It was no longer locked. The hallway had changed. It stretched impossibly long, lined with doors that hadn't been there before. Each one was slightly ajar. Each one breathed. She crept forward. 1 step, 2. She didn't hear her own footsteps, but something else walked in time with her. She turned quickly. No one behind her. But on the wall, her shadow, it stood still. She moved again. The shadow moved before her. It knew where she was going. She passed the mirror. Not a mirror anymore. A window again. This time it looked into her bedroom. But not her bedroom now. The furniture was from her childhood. The faded yellow walls. The mobile of stars above the bed. The rug her grandmother had crocheted. She touched the glass. It was warm. And from behind her a voice whispered, "Remember it so I can wear it." She yanked her hand away, turned. A hallway door creaked open. Light spilled through, but it wasn't her home on the other side. It was a hallway of mirrors, tall, narrow, reaching up into blackness. And each mirror held a different version of her, crying, screaming, laughing without sound. One of them stood perfectly still. It wasn't a reflection. It was waiting. And when she stepped inside, the mirrors began to whisper, each one with a different voice, each one saying the same word, mine. The hallway curved. It shouldn't have. She was inside now, but she couldn't say where. The walls pulsed with slow, steady movement, like something behind them breathed in time with her heartbeat. The floor under her feet was soft, not carpet, not wood. Flesh? She didn't look down. Instead, she focused on the far end of the corridor, where her shadow now stood, facing her, mimicking her pose. Then it waved and stepped backward into the wall. The wall opened like a mouth. The shadow disappeared. Nora followed, not by choice, Her legs moved, but not her. She realized too late. Her limbs responded before her thoughts. Something else was driving. Inside the hidden room, the air was thick and wet. The walls were covered in pictures. All of her. Not photographs, sketches. Drawn in charcoal, blood, dirt. Each one more twisted than the last. Each one less human. The final drawing showed her as a hollow figure, her skin transparent, her bones blackened. Inside her chest, a second face, grinning. The door behind her shut. No handle. She turned slowly. And her shadow stepped forward from the far corner. Not fast, not threatening, just steady. It stood in front of her, still and wrong. Then it mimed her voice, not with sound, with movement. Its mouth moved slowly, forming the shape of her name, Nora. Then it stepped into her, like smoke, like memory, like it had never left. Her body locked, her breath stopped. The lights above flickered, and her reflection reappeared on the wall, watching. She tried to scream. Her mouth moved. But the voice that came out wasn't hers. It said, "I'm home now." The silence was different now. Not empty, occupied, full. Nora stood in the center of her living room, though she wasn't sure how she got there. Her body moved like it had a new memory of how to walk, a rhythm learned from watching itself. The light bulbs overhead buzzed faintly but didn't flicker. No shadows darted through the corners anymore, because they didn't have to hide. They were already inside. Her reflection followed her now, perfectly, eerily. As if mocking how long it had pretended to lag behind, the photographs on the walls had changed again. She didn't recognize the faces. Some were blurred, some were eyeless. But all of them wore her mouth. That wide, involuntary smile stretched too far, as if her skin was only loosely stitched in place. Each picture showed her in the house, not doing anything unnatural, just living, standing, sitting, stirring tea. But she didn't remember being there, didn't remember the moments, didn't remember the clothes, and in each picture there was always a second shadow, always near, always watching. She moved to the hallway and placed her hand against the wall. It pulsed faintly beneath her fingers, like a slow, steady heartbeat. Her name echoed inside it, not whispered now, but breathed. 1,000 lungs, drawing one syllable in unison. Nora. Soft, reverent, like a hymn. She pulled her hand away. Her palm came back smudged black. Not dirt, not ash. Shadow. It stuck to her skin, refusing to flake, and sank into her pores as if it belonged there. She didn't wipe it off. She understood now. The shadow had not possessed her. It had returned, reclaimed something it had lost. She wasn't haunted. She was hollow, and something had remembered how to fill her. The attic door was open. She didn't remember opening it, but the ladder was down, waiting. She climbed without hesitation. Each rung groaned beneath her weight, but not from strain, from recognition. Like bones greeting their own echo. The attic was dark, too dark. The flashlight didn't work here. Light avoided this place. But she didn't need to see. She knew the shape of it. She remembered being here long ago, even though her mind screamed that she had never climbed these steps before, that this was not a place she had lived in, that this was not her home. The air was thick, old, sour, with breath that had never left the lungs it came from. At the center of the attic was a mirror, cracked, ancient, covered in dust, but not opaque. It reflected only one thing: the house behind her, burning, and in the flames a child, watching through the glass, not crying, not calling for help, just watching. The same blank-eyed child from the photo. Nora stepped closer. The child's mouth moved. She knelt, pressed her ear against the glass, and heard her own voice as a child whispering from behind the reflection. I waited. Nora's tears came slow and silent. She didn't remember leaving anyone behind, didn't remember being lost, didn't remember being two. But the attic did. The mirror did. And now the shadows did too. They crept along the walls, not malicious, not hunting, just reaching out, touching her shoulders, her face, tracing the outline of her shape like they were remembering how it was made. And then, merging, she stood and faced the mirror fully. No more child, only her, older, wider eyes, a stitched throat that no longer bled. She opened her mouth, and the voice that came out was not frightened. It was full, clear, still hers, but shared. I remember now. Behind her, the attic door closed on its own. The walls of the house exhaled once, loud and final. And from every surface, from wood, from glass, from fabric, came a slow, growing chorus. Laughter, not cruel, not giddy, but satisfied. The kind of laughter that came at the end of a long journey home. Days passed, or minutes. Time no longer moved the way it used to. Neighbors stopped by once, concerned about the packages on the porch. No answer. They never returned. A realtor drove past, frowning at the unkempt lawn. He didn't get out. Inside, the house remained lit. Always lit. Curtains open. A figure moved from room to room, cooking, reading, staring out the window for hours. She looked like Nora, but no one inside was alone. When the sun set, the second shadow stood beside her, sometimes taller, sometimes smaller, sometimes shaped like something that hadn't been human for a long, long time, but always near. And when it moved, she followed.